flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cohen. Next on the agenda is a transition plan presentation. Again, there's two agenda items this evening, transition planning and winter sports. We'll start with transition plan presentation led by Dr. Marseille and Dr. Smith. I'll turn the meeting over to you both.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. We had put this meeting on the calendar knowing that we needed to present to the board for voting two items that we've been discussing to some extent, but wanted to make a formal presentation. If I may, I'm going to share my screen and I will kind of queue up what is to be expected for tonight and the role of the board and what will be asked of the board throughout this presentation. After that, I will pass that along to our assistant superintendent, Dr. Smith, who will provide you with additional details and insights in our transition, where we will then open that up for questions to the board, from the board, then to the public. Then we will read a motion for the board to vote on. And then right after that, we will have Mr. Blackwell, Director of Athletics, who will talk about winter sports, where from there, the board will be able to ask questions. Then we open the floor for public comments and questions. After all of that, we will then read a motion for the board to consider this this evening. So with that, I'm going to share my screen, which I believe I can't see everyone, but can I get a verbal? Everyone can see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So tonight there are two important conversations, two important voting items. And the first is we're going to talk about our return to a hybrid / virtual model that we anticipate returning in January. What does that mean? It means that we have and then we're going to talk about sports as well. So what does that mean for the board? Well, on August 3rd, if I can take you all the way back, we presented to you a health and safety plan that incorporated the learning model in which we were going to move forward with. In that plan, really spoke to what were we going to do as a district to make sure that per CDC and other health guidelines, we would be able to meet those in order to have students and staff return safely to school. Well, in that plan, we decided that we were going to move into a virtual model. Either or, we still need to present a health and safety plan that currently exists, that as things are moving and we get more information, that document is updated. And then on August 3rd, the board voted that for the health and safety plan and the model of return, which was a full virtual experience. And at that time, we did not identify a potential return date. We just said that we were going to continue to monitor the situation and probably look at something into the new year. So today, what we this is what you voted on, right? In terms of you voted on a total remote learning experience that was going to take effect August 31st. Today, and some of the slides that you will see by Dr. Smith, what we're going to ask the board to vote on after presentation, after questions, after conversations, after deliberation is the district's proposal that we return to school in a blended model that allows the opportunity if so parents choose to come back in either a hybrid in-person model, and those are varying models depending on a lot of factors, which Dr. Smith will discuss. Um, and another group who will decide whether or not they want to opt for a virtual experience. So tonight you're going to be asked to vote on administration's recommendation that the district return to a blended model, which is a combination of in-person and remote learning based on information we're gonna get, and we have a good sense of what that is, and Dr. Smith will share that with you, and a anticipated date of January 11th. With that said, we know that we find ourselves right back where we were several months ago. And it's deja vu all over again with what we are seeing, unfortunately, with the spike in positivity and incident rates and hospitalization. And recently, I communicated with our larger community and shared what the Office of Public Health decided to put into a mandate. And that is, in light of the rise, that they are going to um, require all public and private schools to move into a remote learning model effective November 23rd through um, December 6th, which at the end of the day, they left the room open for, depending on how things play out, meaning depending on where the numbers are as we look at them every 2 weeks, that this could be something that they revisit again, especially the rationale for this idea about traditional celebrations, what usually happens during a Thanksgiving break, coupled with what they are the numbers of high COVID cases, has a significant potential of increasing those. And though we are not seeing spread in schools, the numbers, they are where they are right now. And if not mitigated, we can anticipate that that is what will happen. So I've shared with this community this chart for quite some time, that was provided by the Pennsylvania Department of Education and the Office of Public Health to help districts think about a series of data points where they can use to consider, to the extent in which they need to start having conversations about whether or not they are going to move into a different instructional model. And that's based on whether you have low transmission, which is you're controlling the spread of the virus, whether it's moderate, meaning you're doing a good job. There's still some concerns, but with moderate, you can decide, using this data point and a number of other factors, that you can decide blended or full remote, or where Montgomery County sits right now. Hence the reason why the Office of Public Health moved with this order, is that if you are, incident rates are at least 100 or more, and or you're greater than 10%, you're going to go full remote. Well, the reality is Montgomery County has hit that at least 100 cases per 100,000 residents at 181. And then positivity rates, though not at 10%, alarmingly high at 7.2%. We have always looked at, we meaning Cheltenham, a look at our positivity rates to be, to use that as a gauge to say, are we staying below 5%? And when we get over 5%, can we start having conversations with the Office of Public Health with respects to what do we need to do? We've been fortunate as a community that we extended our virtual learning experience because earlier in August, we discussed that we were fearful that if we return to school, there would be significant disruption and a lack of continuity as a result of positive cases and closures. And we wanted to really make sure that we did this virtual learning experience well and get that down first. And we extended that. So we are currently in a virtual model and does not have a significant impact, though we have a small number of our students in the district who are getting in-person instruction. So as a result of that, that's Montgomery County. This is Cheltenham. And as you can see, the incident rates since 10/29 have skyrocketed. We're expecting to get other data points next week. We anticipate those will go up. And our incidence rates, our positivity rates continue to go up from 5.3 to 5.96. So throughout this process, the Montgomery County Office of Public Health provided districts with a streamline of options we have or a set of metrics to advise school districts on when they need to start thinking about transitioning to a different model. Reaching those data points doesn't necessarily mean as soon as you reach them, you pivot. There's a lot of moving parts with that. What it does say is that 3 significant factors, and 2 of them have sub bullets as well. One of them is link transmission in your schools. So that means if there are positive cases that are happening in your schools, can you connect those positive cases to in-school transmission, meaning that this is happening and students are infecting each other or vice versa, or parents, or adults are transmitting the virus amongst themselves in between schools. When that happens, there is a conversation with the Office of Public Health to determine if indeed, if this is linked transmission, they could provide recommendation that the school temporarily shift from in-person instruction to a remote learning model. The other, or if there is a 2-week trend with regards to Cheltenham's incident rates and positivity rates. So for 2 weeks, if you are between 80 and 100 per 100,000 incidences, and your positivity rates are between 6 and 8%, this would trigger a conversation with the Office of Public Health, looking at other factors, because you could be in school right now, though the incident rates are really high, but there's nothing happening inside your building, right? So it would appear that you're providing instruction, staff is safe, students are safe from the perspective that no one is testing positive and it's not connected to an in the building transmission. Or you have what is known as functional closure. What does that mean? That means that for a number of factors, for lack of staffing, you're unable to provide the level of service that customarily is expected by our community, our families, the board, administration, and you're going to have to close because of that. An example of that would be if there are a large number of staff members who are sick and they are unable to come to the building, they are unable to provide vital functions that keeps the building operational, we're going to have to close the building. And that is not only from the instructional side, that is also from the operational side as well. So those 3 really kind of give a sense of the metrics that we are using to determine when we hit those, the conversation with the Office of Public Health to determine whether or not, if that is the case, um, we need to shift to another model. The functional closure is probably the easiest one. The reality is you have X number of staff members, and we'll talk a little about this, or Dr. Smith will touch a little about this, is that though we are moving forward with a blended model, and families will be asked very soon to confirm their model. Some of those models are dependent, or those models are dependent on staffing. To what extent do we have the staff available in order to support that particular model? We won't know that. We don't know that yet. We're going to have to get that information, create that schedule, and then determine the best extent whether or not we're able to move forward in that direction. So tonight, the board's request, or administration's request to the board, is we will present a blended model with an option for parents to either go into a virtual learning model or a hybrid, with anticipated start date of January 11th for students to return, and there'll be a little bit more details with regards to that process. Knowing that this is, and we said this before, that is extremely fluid. I said that at our last meeting, that particular data points can have an impact on the district's original plans and original dates, and we will try to, as much as possible, give as much advance notice to families and to staff as that is happening. So that's the first part. The second is the conversation we've been having with regards to winter sports. And part of that is we believe, though the numbers are rising, that with small cohorts of students and obviously small coaching staff, it staggered throughout the building, that we could offer a safe experience for students to begin practice. And obviously there are some pending data points that we're going to need to observe before we move into competition. But we at least wanted to have the board present to the board a plan to say that this is what we believe this could look like. These are obviously the ongoing safety measures that we're going to be put into place, and ask the board to vote on winter sports. So that really is the bulk, if not all, of the conversations that we're going to have tonight. Asking the board to approve administration's motion that the district in January return to a blended model of instruction that gives an option for families to choose a online or remote learning experience, and or a hybrid, and the development of a winter sports plan that allows small cohorts of our students to begin practicing with further guidelines to come with regards to competition, but at least begin that practice session. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Dr. Smith, our assistant superintendent, will walk you through a series of slides, a series of information. I have to say that the vast majority of this information, some members of the public are in receipt of. They've been part of our committee meetings where we presented some of these. They've been part of letters that I've sent to the community, and I've attached some particular links, but we are going to go into detail a little bit more around dates and what it could look like, so the board can make an informed decision and open the floor for community questions and comments before a vote is taken. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen, and I will ask Dr. Smith um, to pull up her screen and begin her presentation.
Good evening, everyone. The following presentation represents a culmination of all of the school opening committees, meetings, and what the recommendation is to date. I do want to preface this presentation with the idea that the dates and the majority of the information that is shared on this presentation was put together prior to the recent information that we've received about the surge and some of the things that are going on in the county. So I want to make sure that people have that as a backdrop as we begin. So just as a reminder, we have 4 school reopening committees. They are led by myself, Dr. Horsey, Mr. Teasdale, and also Mr. Kaufman. Dr. Marseille has appointed me as the person who leads the school reopening overall, hence my presentation tonight on behalf of all of my fellow committees. First, we'll start with curriculum instruction. These are in alphabetical order. They're not in any order of importance because they're all important. Curriculum instruction, we will implement a reopening process that is phased. It will bring people back, students back, staff back to buildings in phases. We will not ignore our families who have decided that they do not want to return back to the buildings under any circumstance. So all of these options do come with a 100% virtual option. When students come back in a hybrid model, it will look very similar to what we are doing now with asynchronous and synchronous learning will continue to take place. We've heard positive feedback from our families and our community that they enjoy the process and the procedure that we've been following now. So that old saying, if it isn't broken, don't fix it. So we will be utilizing that system. Also, Wednesdays will remain the same as a day for asynchronous instruction. Teachers, staff, students, and parents have also expressed that this part of our model has been very helpful to give students and staff a midday or midweek opportunity to regroup, to plan, and to reflect on the week prior to moving forward. Again, this is the schedule that currently resides on our website. There are no changes that have been made. This is just a reminder. Hybrid Schedule A takes into account that the vast majority of students will return in person. And under this model, we will have students coming in groups. Group 1 would be Monday, Tuesday. Group 2 would be Thursday, Friday, and Wednesday would remain an asynchronous day. And that is what the elementary schedule would look like. For Cedar Brook and the high school, it will look again very similar with Group 1 and Group 2. However, CHS, I have that asterisk next to CHS because I want to bring to the board's attention as well as our community's attention that high school scheduling is difficult. It's complicated. There are a lot of moving parts. So it's more difficult to split a high school group and say half of a class comes Monday, Tuesday, half of the class comes Thursday, Friday, because every class may be a different group of students and we don't need students jumping in, jumping out of groups. So we have that asterisk there because I'm working very closely with Ms. Collins, our Director of Secondary Education, as well as Dr. Lahara, our high school principal, and Dr. Hammond, who handles scheduling at CHS, to talk about what this will look like. And in full transparency, in order for us to settle on the high school schedule, we will have to have information from our families regarding their choice of students coming in person or their students staying home for a full virtual model. So that asterisk will stay there until we get more data from our families. Hybrid Schedule B is a schedule that takes into account approximately half of our students will participate in person, meaning half of our families will opt for hybrid. Under this model, students will come every day. The student group will come every day, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Wednesdays will still remain asynchronous. This is the model based on the data that we have as of today. This is the model that seems more likely to take place. Based on our data prior to the surge, we have approximately a 50-50 split, approximately. And I believe that now with the current surge and the current information that we may have more families who opt for the virtual model. That remains to be seen, but based on the data we have, hybrid Schedule B seems to be the one that we will most likely go into. Again, you see that asterisk under secondary for the high school, because we need to really look deeply at the high school schedule and see who's actually coming back, what content areas are going to be impacted prior to us saying what hybrid Schedule B would look like for our high school students. So as it relates to curriculum and instruction, important next steps is we will be requesting final school opening arrangements from families. We don't have a hard date for that yet, because the committees have discussed that as the surge has taken place, as more data comes out from the scientific community as well as the medical community, we want to make sure that families have all the information or all the data that they need to make these decisions. And when they make the decision, it needs to be around, not only will you opt in for a hybrid model where you come in person, will you have transportation provided by the district? What will lunch look like? Will you participate in class? So on and so forth. The other important next steps is to ensure that we have all of our instructional resources available. And I will tell you what that means is we have the resources in the building. The Office of Education, my team did a very good job of being ahead of schedule in terms of making sure we have all of our e-resources as well as paper resources. So if we decide to do a hybrid model where students return, we will have to do another book and resource distribution to make sure that everyone has what they need. So the materials are in district. We just need to make sure that we come up with a system to get them in the hands of families. Also, the third step, which is a very important step that we've been implementing all year, is to make sure that we continue ongoing professional development for our staff members to support this hybrid model, as well as remote instructional models as we go along. The next section focuses on health and wellness, led by Dr. Horsey. And with the health and wellness, we are exploring a new health monitoring tool. And so I'm going to share this quick video that reflects the new monitoring tool that we're going to use by Qualtrics.
Of all the challenges schools have faced this year, knowing how to safely reopen campus might be the biggest challenge yet. The Qualtrics Back to School solutions make it easy to implement safety measures that keep your faculty, staff, and students safe and healthy, even in the absence of widespread testing. With the Qualtrics Symptom Check, you can easily identify students and staff who are experiencing signs of illness in accordance with evolving CDC guidelines and direct them to stay away from campus. Those showing no symptoms are given a time-stamped certification of health that you can require for anyone entering one of your buildings. In the event that someone at your school tests positive, the Qualtrics Contact Tracing solution will help notify students and staff who might have been in contact with the infected person, so they can immediately start practicing appropriate safety measures and get tested. The data from these solutions is automatically analyzed and displayed in real time through actionable, role-based dashboards that make it easy to identify hotspots and take specific actions to ensure you're maintaining a safe learning environment. Sign up today and let's get back to school.
So that is the new monitoring tool that Dr. Horsey and her team is putting in place for us to consider as we move forward. As you know, now we're currently using a Google Sheet model to monitor health and wellness. And while that model has served its purpose for what we've needed at this point, we do need to go to a more upgraded model. And that's what Dr. Horsey and her team has explored for us. And let me go back to sharing the presentation. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for one moment so I can get this to go back to share mode. And I apologize for the break. And so in addition to the new health monitoring tool, we also have increased signage and awareness throughout our buildings to make sure that we're constantly giving students and also any visitors, specifically staff, also giving them the information that they need to remind them of what the expectations are in the building. We have signage, again, one-way signage, 6 feet apart. We have the floors marked also to help our students and our staff with social distancing. In addition, protective equipment for student and staff safety is in the building, is a key part of our plan. Face coverings, plexiglass, sneeze guards are in our classrooms, hand sanitizer, and also resources for cleaning are available, readily available. School exclusion recommendations. This chart, I'm sure you've seen multiple times, this quarantining protocol. This is in the presentation just to remind everyone that we are aware that this is something that we're following as we bring our students and staff back. Important next steps under health and wellness is, again, to review and implement the new tool, to ensure that the signage is in place, to make sure that we continue to attend all of the meetings from the health department and all of our partners that keep us up to date with the most accurate information. We make sure that we implement all of our health and wellness protocols. And I think for me, the largest part of our next steps is to continue ongoing collaboration with our staff, ongoing training, ongoing health and wellness sessions for our families as well, so that people know exactly what we're doing and what we're expecting as we bring our staff and students back to our buildings safely. Under operations, which is led by Mr. Teasdale, he has shared with me several school level updated reopening action steps. And these action steps take place specifically at our 2 older buildings, Elkins Park School and the high school. So as you can see by the action items that are listed on the screen, there are purifiers that are currently being installed at Elkins Park. They are being done in-house by our maintenance team. At the high school, the univent repairs and balancing is in progress. Scheduled completion is this week. Also at the high school, additional air purifiers have arrived and they are currently being installed. So those are just some of our school level action steps. At the district level, we have put in more paper towel dispensers, and they're installed in the place of hand dryers in light of where we are. Water fountains have been shut down. However, the water bottle stations have been left on. Hand sanitizer stations have been installed throughout the buildings, and classrooms have full bottles of hand sanitizer that will be on hand for all of our students and staff. We will continue to monitor and make sure that the PPE supplies are adequate. Sneeze guards have been installed at all of the high traffic points, mainly focused at reception areas. Building principals are working with the facility staff in order to make sure that in terms of making sure that students are 6 feet apart in classrooms, that any furniture request or removal that needs to go along with that takes place. And also, last but not least, there may be some adjustments to staffing schedules in order to ensure building coverage, because as we know, the pandemic is in our own backyard, and it has has impacted some of our staff members. So we have some scheduling things that we need to take into consideration as people are nursed back to health. Important steps for facilities is to review options for plastic shields for our cafeteria in the event that we decide to use the cafeteria for group lunches. And again, this will all be dependent upon the number of students in which we serve. So Mr. Teasdale is looking into options for the plastic shields, and he has meetings scheduled with the vendor to decide what the next steps should be. The Cheltenham Family School Reopening Survey results is very key to the 3 topics I just discussed. And so the results are a result of 2,250 respondents. So one of the questions we asked is, which of the following options is more likely for your child, likely starting in January? And as you can see, across all schools, about 56% of our families said that they would send their children back for a hybrid model. 44% said that they would opt for a completely virtual model. And we asked these questions prior to the surge. And so I want to just, again, leave that in the background to state that this is not something we asked yesterday, not something we asked last week. So we need to take that into consideration, that some families may have made a change since we collected this data. The next question we asked about was, which of the following options would we choose? Would it be full day on alternating days, or half the day coming to school? And by an overwhelming majority, we have families who are saying, if I opt for the hybrid model, I would prefer for my child to come in for a full day as a part of a group 1 and a group 2, or a full day as a part of the only hybrid students. We didn't have many takers for the half day daily. In terms of lunch, we have about 66% of our families saying that their child will come to school with home lunch, 34% for school lunch. I want to give a disclaimer on this slide as well to say we did ask families and we asked adults what they were going to do. I'm not sure. I know I'm guilty of this. I'm not sure how many families have asked their children what they prefer. And you know, sometimes you have it in your mind as an adult, I'm going to pack you a home lunch, and your kid goes to the lunch line and lines up for the free lunch that is being given out anyway. So we need to take that into consideration as we consider the numbers, that while mom and dad may have decided to send a school lunch or even actually send a school lunch, students may come to school and still ask for a lunch. And since we're in a phase where school lunch is free, we will not be turning away students who request lunch. So I just wanted to make sure we were clear with that. The next question was about transportation. We have 52% of our families saying that they will drop their kids off and pick them up from school. 40% of the students will use transportation provided by the district, and we have a small percentage that will be walking. And again, the chart on the right kind of breaks it down by school. So if you look at it by school, you can see that district transportation is a big option for Elkins Park and Cedar Brook, and not so much for our other schools. In terms of class, these are numbers on the chart on the right and not percentages. So these are the numbers of students that we're expecting for class in terms of morning, afternoon, and afternoon and morning by grade. And so the next few slides are meant to be a visual, a calendar to give you an idea of what this could look like. These are not dates that are set in stone. These are dates that will be reviewed and discussed by the school board of directors and voted upon as you see fit. Starting next week, there will be no classes on Monday or Tuesday for K-8 students as a result of parent-teacher report card conferences. That is our regular schedule. That is not a deviation from anything we've done in the past. On Wednesdays, there are no classes K-12, and Thursday is Thanksgiving, Friday, no school. As we get into December, on November 30th, remote learning will continue. And on December 1st, we will implement the new health screening tool from Qualtrics that was mentioned. So we will begin to use that tool, begin to figure it out, begin to allow people to use it prior to a full return. So any learning that we may need to do, any data analysis that we may be unsure of, this will give us enough time in the very beginning to start to work with this new tool. And again, that effort is being led by Dr. Horsey and her team. On Wednesday, the 2nd, it will be the first of a series of school meetings for staff on safely returning to buildings, because we have a big commitment and a serious commitment to making sure that as we talk about returning and as we work on returning, that we give all of our adults and students the tools that they need to return safely and to have the information that they need to make decisions as they move throughout the buildings. There will also be school town hall meetings for families to ask questions, to get additional information. And as you all know, while we make decisions as a district, there are some things that are specific to certain schools. It may be the way that the building is designed, where the bathrooms are located. It may determine that at a certain school, certain things may need to be done differently. So during those town hall meetings, parents will have an opportunity to ask questions that are specific to their schools. This calendar shows that in-person instruction will resume for students who were already receiving in-person instruction. And as you remember, we have brought back some of our students who we believe, based on their IEPs, also based on 504 plans, and also based on their status as ELL students who require in-person instruction. So tentatively, and again, this is not written in stone, and again, these dates were established well before the surge. Tentatively on December 7th, those students would resume their in-person instruction. And as you can see, the town hall meetings and so on and so forth will continue during this time. At the bottom of the 7th, where I'm kind of circling here, winter season practices will begin. That is a placeholder that is totally at the discretion and at the pleasure of the board, whether or not that happens. If the board decides to vote on winter sports and state that winter sports will commence, that is the starting date. So again, these dates, and I want to be clear to the public and clear to our school board of directors, and also to our teachers and our administrators, these dates are placeholders. These dates serve to show a sample of how this could happen and what this could look like as we return. But I wanted you all to see how we have a week-to-week staggering. I wanted you to see day to day what we're thinking about as we bring families back, what things need to be infused into our decision making. As we go further into December, on the 14th, tentatively, we have discussed in those the blueprint, bringing those staff members back to the building to begin to teach their classes from the building while students will still be at home. So remote instruction is still in place. However, instead of Tamara Smith teaching her class from her den, which is where I am now, I would teach my class from room 201, which is my room, say in Wincote Elementary School. And the purpose behind bringing teachers back before we bring students back is to give teachers a chance to see, can I teach online and have this bandwidth support what I'm doing with students at home? Does this support what I'm doing with my students? Can I move throughout the building safely and honor social distancing and honor the health and safety plan? This is where we get an opportunity to see that everything that we put in place is effectively working, and to give our teachers and staff a chance to give us feedback, to give us input about what's working and what's not working. We have fielded multiple questions from CEA asking about, how are you going to do this? How will this work? How will that work? All valid questions, all questions that we're attempting to answer. And in this case, we believe that some of these questions could be answered better with people actually on the ground in the building and seeing the upgrades and seeing the changes and seeing things that are in place. And as I stated, while this calendar shows December 14th, the school board of directors may well say, you know what, Dr. Smith, the 14th is too soon. Team, the 14th is too soon. Reopening committees, we appreciate the work that you put into the calendar, but we think we want to push it back. We are not locked into these dates. These dates are all proposed dates. And again, just an idea to show you how this staggering and gradual release would take place. So on the 14th, those teachers would come back, grade 1, grade 5, grade 7, grades 9 through 10. That would be the staff return. So basically, we're trying to bring back approximately half the building on the 14th, and then bring back the other half of the building, as you can see in the blueprint, on the 17th. Also, we will continue with our in-person instruction for those students who were previously identified as needing in-person instruction. And that is listed again twice because some students are being instructed by teachers who are not their home teachers. What that means is some Wincote teachers may have a group or a cohort of students that come from multiple buildings. So once we start to bring the staff back in full, students will go to their home schools and return to the buildings for which they are typically assigned. And again, as you can see, those staff meetings will continue, safety protocol meetings will continue, town hall meetings will continue throughout the month of December. And as you can see here, after that asynchronous day, we go into our winter break starting on the 21st 4th. Again, we're still in December, the 28th through the 31st. We continue our winter break. No one will be in any of our buildings. Everyone hopefully will be enjoying the time off and quarantining and continuing to follow all the rules that we've been asked to follow by our medical community as well as our scientific community. Remote learning would resume on January 4th. That is our return date. And remote learning will look exactly how it looked today. Teachers teaching from their classrooms. I'm sorry, not from today in terms of teachers, but in terms of students. Students will be at home, learning at home. Teachers would teach from their classrooms. And on the 11th, we would start to bring back students. Pre-K through 1, grade 5 on the 11th. We would then phase in grades 2 through 4 and grade 6 on the 14th. This is our MLK holiday on the 18th. We will bring in grade 7. You see that asterisk again for high school. As I explained, the high school schedule is not cut and dry. And I'll say this multiple times. The 11th is not a hard date. It is a proposed date. The reason why the 11th was proposed as the sample date is because that date is approximately 2 weeks after the major holiday in which families and people may gather and may need to take 14 days to settle in and to re-quarantine before they go back out into public spaces. But again, if the board desires to push the 11th back, it can be pushed back. But this calendar is meant to capture what the gradual return will look like and how we'll get all students back eventually. And again, this may change either based on the pleasure of the board, and this may change based on data and information that we've received from the medical or scientific community. So this slide captures important dates and next steps as proposed in the calendar. November 23rd, we will be asking the school board to review a final submission of the reopening plan. So tonight you may say, Dr. Smith, go back to the team and let the team know we want students to start on this date. We would prefer to push the staff reopening to that date. And we're hoping to have all of those final pieces in place by November 23rd. December 1st, regardless of what we decide, we will start our school town hall meetings. December 7th, unless the board and the Montgomery County's health department decides differently, we have that date as students returning for in-person instruction. And those are the students who are already receiving in-person instruction. Some of our students who have IEPs, some of our students who have 504 plans, and some of our students who have been designated as ELL students. Again, if we keep with the schedule that I presented just now, December 14th will be the start of the gradual return. December 15th, we will ask families to submit, and that says surveys, but they're not quite as surveys, but I couldn't figure out what word I wanted to put in the place of it. But according to this schedule, we will be asking by December 15th for families to tell us, how would you like your student to return? And the caveat with this is once a family decides on their model, we're asking them to commit to that model until June 2021. So we need this to be something where families have enough time, enough information to make a decision. And once the decision is made, we are asking families, if you decide to be virtual, that you understand that you will be virtual from now until June. If you decide that you want to take advantage of a hybrid model, you have to be prepared to accept that as your assignment till June. However, I do want to tell you that if families decide that they want to keep their students home for a virtual model at whatever time, that is something that we can accommodate with a lot more speed than we could in reverse. And that's why we're asking people to make that decision early. When parents decide to come in person and to engage in a hybrid model, that impacts, again, our class program, that impacts our school lunch program, that impacts transportation. And all of those things require a significant amount of time, a significant amount of planning, which is why we're asking families to select a model, and also, reminding families that once they select the model, they will be committing to that model. January 11th, according to the dates I just shared, would be the start of gradual hybrid instruction. However, that date can be pushed back at the pleasure and desire of the board. And again, January 25th, based on this model, would be the full hybrid return. And I know I've said a lot and I've talked a very long time, but I wanted to make sure I cleared everything. And at this time, if anyone has any questions, I'll turn it over to Ms. Haywood, our school board president, to facilitate any Q&A that we may have.
Thank you very much, both Dr. Marseille and Dr. Smith. I'm going to turn this out to the board for board questions before we even look at the proposed amendment. So if you have a question, please raise your hand and I will call on you. And for the public, I know a question came in. We will be having some time for for community questions after we've had a chance for the board to ask questions and make any comments, and prior to the board making any vote on the amendment that's been proposed. And I'll give those instructions after the board questions. So if you just raise your hand in the participant list, I'll call on you. I see Mr. England, Mr. Cohen, and Mr. Schultz in that order.
Thank you, Mrs. Haywood. Dr. Smith, thank you for the informative presentation. As we look at what's coming potentially January, as you've said, and we all say, everything is subject to change depending upon what happens. But I had a question for you. So you said that we're looking for staff to be back in the building sometime in December. Is that correct? And they would then do remote teaching from their classrooms?
Correct. And the purpose of that is to give staff an opportunity to start to get reacclimated to the new normal, if you will, and also for us to test out the technology, the bandwidth, for us to make sure that we, put all of the health and safety things in place. And staff may kick it up a little bit and ask for additional support or additional things that'll give us a chance to answer those requests prior to us bringing students back to the building and prior to us having a full capacity building.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's also an opportunity since the option is going to be there for students to remain virtual for the rest of the year. I guess this also allows working through any technology bugs, making certain that, because the image I'm getting in my mind is we could have a classroom with X number of students, we'll say 8 students in person, and then a number of students who are learning virtually from the same teacher, the same course.
And that could be the case. That may not be the case, but that could be the case. So that is absolutely right, what you just captured.
Okay. And phase the students back in, and we'll be offering transportation and everything like we did prior to March, I assume. So I had one question then. What you said right at the end there, that there's going to be a survey of families, what do they prefer for their student for the rest of the school year? And you said it sounds like they have to lock in December. If you pick hybrid, you're hybrid until June, and vice versa.
So everything you said, with the exception of they would have to lock in December if we have a January return, because we have to have planning take place. So if the board says the return date is January 19th instead of January 11th, that would give families, we could push the survey up an additional week. So everything kind of moves in the same place.
And of course, it all depends upon what's happening with this pandemic, this virus. We could reopen and then find ourselves closing fairly quickly or at some point in time. If that happens, does that then mean that everything resets if we have to close and everybody goes virtual again, or is the administration going to then survey families again about what they want to do from that point?
So
I'm not sa-
my thoughts are yes, we will resurvey. As a parent of school-age children, I will tell you, I have gone backward and forwards about my own decision to send my children to school, and I'm assuming that our families are having that same talk within their households to figure out what works. And it does change. You hear a news report or you get additional information, and it does cause you to rethink. So we will continue to monitor, as Dr. Marseille mentioned, monitor those conversations. But I just want to be clear that everything is kind of following a certain pathway. If one thing gets pushed back, everything gets pushed back.
Okay, I got you, understand. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. England. I have Mr. Cohen next.
Yes, Dr. Smith, thank you very much for your hard work on this and the presentation. A few questions around process. I'll group the first two questions together that relate in terms of concept. What happens if a family does not, for whatever reason, complete the survey form? And also similarly, what happens if a family or a student, however it's delineated, does not complete the Qualtrics survey?
So first thing is, if a family doesn't complete the form, and we have not put together the form, but in theory, the form that we put together will make it very clear that you are locking yourself in until June when you make a decision. That's the first thing. The second thing is, we will make it very clear in multiple communications via social media, via our email blast, via the text messaging system that Mr. Kaufman uses, that if families do not make a choice, we will choose for them, and that choice will be virtual.
Okay. And the second part was about the Qualtrics form in terms of related to people's health and well-being. If students or their parents don't complete that, what happens?
So we've talked about that. I know the Health and Safety Committee has talked about that, and several of you serve on the Health and Safety Committee. Dr. Horsey, do you want to speak to what we discussed regarding if a family drops off a student and that student has not filled out the form for that day?
Yes, so good evening all, and thank you so very much for your question, Mr. Cohen. Just as we do now with our Google form, if a family has not completed that form, we ask that the student remain in the main lobby area. We contact the parent and we ask the parent to fill the form out. This tool must be completed just as it is happening now. There will be reminders actually that can be sent to families too. So that's the beauty of this tool. It's a little more robust, if you will, than what we're utilizing now.
Great. Thank you. Those are really my major questions. Again, thank you for the hard work. The one suggestion, I know they were grappling with this a little bit, which is understandable, in terms of it's not really a survey per se, is you might want to look at calling it a form or a registration form or a selection form and move away from the word survey. And that survey, of course, delineates or indicates that it's somewhat more of an opinion versus somewhat which is somewhat frankly binding, and which is an obligation that the parents are making on behalf of the student. So thank you very much again.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Next, I have Mr. Schultz.
Thank you. And I thank you for the presentation and this work. I just want to take a moment to recognize how challenging it must be to come up with yet another novel model for educating an entire student body. And I know there are many, many hands reflected in that work, but Dr. Smith in particular, thank you for leading that charge. I have a question around, I have a couple questions. The first is, are there any preparations necessary for remaining virtual? In other words, if the decision and leaning is to not engage in a hybrid model, say for the month of January, or maybe the month of January and the month of February, are there steps that need to be taken to ensure that it remains as smooth as it has been so far this year?
So the good part is that there won't be any steps necessarily for families and children to take, but administration, depending on the number of families who choose the virtual option, we may have to go through a process where we designate some of our instructional staff as virtual only teachers. And if and when that happens, unfortunately, that may require some shifting of students to maybe not have the same teacher that they have now. We will do, and we are committed to doing everything to not make a change and make a switch. But again, all of this is fluid. We're working with the resources that we have. We're trying our best to make sure we don't have to make that change, which is why the high school schedule is still not in place. Because as you all know, the high school schedule, they don't travel as a group or cohort like a 5th grade class or a 6th grade class. So it may be that my English teacher is teaching me virtually, if I'm a virtual student, it may be that I'm getting English instruction from Dan Schultz, who's teaching from his classroom, and I may get mathematics instruction from Ms. Lohman, who's a virtual only mathematics teacher.
Understood. Okay. And actually, that's a very helpful answer. But to clarify, my question was, if you mentioned earlier that it may be that the feedback you get from the board this evening is, hey, we're not comfortable right now, given the current numbers. The plan looks very solid. However, we would want to postpone switch to the hybrid model until I was spitballing March 1st instead of January 4th. Is there any additional effort necessary for that to happen?
No,
Okay.
know the Office of Education has enough instructional materials and resources to last us through June, whether we're in a virtual model or a hybrid model.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
No problem.
On the flip side, under the hybrid model, I wanted to clarify my understanding. If a family opted into the in-person hybrid model, and then for whatever reason, maybe a family member has COVID in the household, but they need to quarantine, maybe they're exposed, but they need to quarantine, would those students be essentially out of any form of education for the duration of quarantine because they had opted for in-person, or would they have an opportunity to access virtual resources?
Virtual resources are available to all students at any time. And thank you for asking that question. To be clear, it takes less planning to have a student go back to a virtual model, and much more planning and much more forethought to have a student come in the building. So anyone who wants to do virtual at any time, if they wants to drop and go to virtual at any time, that is a much more seamless transition. It doesn't cost us anything. It doesn't require us to plan much, but to tell a teacher that this student will be showing up online as opposed to in person. And the reverse is where it becomes a problem, because we have to consider, again, transportation. We have to consider food services, and we're making all of our plans based on how parents register their students for the return.
Thank you. So that the point to be extra crystal clear, a student can always switch to virtual learning. It's just switching back that would not be
Correct. In the middle of a pandemic, we would never take a position to tell a family that you signed up to send your kid to school and you're stuck with it.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. My last question is, actually, I have a process question. Actually, I'll save that to the end. My last question related to this timeline is the timeline for when you need a decision from the board to when the first kickoff event in the calendar you presented. I wanted to understand. I know that the more time, the better from a planning perspective. But do you need a full month's notice? Does administration feel that there needs to be a full month between the point that a date is selected by the board and when that process begins?
I would say yes, because again, if we have to establish virtual only teachers, that's going to take some time to process. To Mr. Teasdale's point that he raised earlier, we have some staff members and some staff concerns in terms of making sure the buildings are properly staffed. So we'll need time. We'll also need time for bus scheduling and bus routing for parents who want to take advantage of school bus options. So yes, I would say anything. So I would go on record to say anything that we shift, it needs to all shift in one big piece. So if you move your decision back a week, then move everything else back a week. So everything would kind of move with your decision. If you decide, you know what, we're not going to decide by the 23rd, we want to decide by December 30th, then move everything back along those same parameters.
And I actually realized, Dr. Smith, you shouldn't, I didn't mean to make you feel like you're in the hot seat. And if that question should have been directed at to Dr. Marseille,
No,
feel free at any point to punt things over.
I don't feel like I'm in the hot seat.
Okay, good.
It was a very lengthy presentation, and I'm taking your questions to mean that you're
Sure.
trying to get additional information to be clear. And I'm pretty sure that some of the questions you're asking, some of our families may have those same questions. So I don't feel like I'm on the hot seat at all.
Oh, great. And then my last question, which is actually for Ms. Haywood, is around the process for right now. These are questions related to the presentation, not related to the vote around the amendment, correct? This is not part of discussion related to a motion that hasn't occurred. We'll have another opportunity to talk about opinions on the vote later.
So in terms of process, as I understand it, this is to go out to the board to ask any questions related to the presentation. Prior to going out to the public, we do need to pose the amendment, not to be voted on at that moment, because we definitely want to hear from the public as it relates to the amendment. There is a possibility that that amendment that gets presented could be further amended by a motion of the board. And then after we get community comment, we would come back and vote on the either amendment that's on the table or a variation of that amendment, depending on what the board proposes. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
And Mr. Roos, I'm going to defer to you in case there was anything about that you wanted to add or correct.
No, that's exactly correct, Mrs. Haywood, and I'm here for Mr. Roos today. But I know I'm popping up on the screen as him. So you summarized that exactly correct.
You're definitely a younger version of Ken Roos.
You don't look a
Not
thing
as many
like
gray
him.
hairs yet, you know.
So is that clear to the rest of the board in terms of process? Okay.
Thank you. And my last question is related to the hybrid plan put forth. Is there, I understand that from a staffing perspective, this may not actually be a possibility, but from a plan perspective, is there any consideration to have a hybrid model similar to models considered way long ago, where high school is considered differently than elementary, or maybe even considered differently than K-2?
Correct. So yes, and that falls in line with that asterisk that kept coming up with the high school. Once we look at the schedules, once we know who's coming back, that may be the recommendation that high school stays 100% virtual. Doesn't have to be the recommendation, but that is on the list of things that could come up. And that's why we made sure that asterisk appeared throughout the presentation to remind people that high school is still very much undecided right now. And that could be how we do things.
All right. Thank you very much. That's all my questions for now.
No
Okay.
problem.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. I have Mr. Burdell Williams.
I'm both. I'm Charles and Mr. Burdell Williams. Thank you, Dr. Smith and Dr. Marseille, for the presentation. So I have two questions. First, I appreciate the thoughtfulness of my fellow board members, because it seems like a lot of us were thinking the same thing with our line of questioning initially, and that's awesome. My one question is about start times. So right now, I think this was brought up in one of our previous meetings, that the school start times are essentially 9 a.m. For our students, and we'll have at least Cedarbrook and the high school moving to the earlier school start time. I'm not going to use this as a moment for us to discuss the earlier start time topic, but I want to know if, in fact, given the amount of respondents who have decided via the initial survey that they would not be using transportation, and that has been cited previously as reasoning behind going back to our what looks like our standard start times, Has there been any consideration into adjusting those start times appropriately by the administration?
Dr. M, you want to respond to that?
Now you're passing that off.
Because you work with Mr. Custer and Miss Michael.
We have, but the principals have not sat down to have that conversation. That was something that the principals brought up at Superintendent's Council to determine the flow of what would it look like, because it was concerned that the times in which the students arrived may not be in sync with when teachers actually start. And do we need to find a way in which to shift that? Principals need to know before they make their schedule, how many kids are they, how many children or students are they going to be expected to receive? And from there, what's the level of supervision going to be outside and when they come in and teacher start time? So that is a conversation that has not been solidified, but a concern that has been raised that we need to work through.
Okay.
But the principals need to get together as they raise that as a concern.
Understood. Yeah, it's something that I believe would be an important topic to discuss, just given how quickly it seems like we would be switching from one start time to the next. It's almost as drastic as going from summer break to, returning back to a full-fledged schedule very quickly. That's actually the only question I have right now on the topic. I appreciate how thorough, again, the work has been from the administration and all of the subcommittees that have fed into this process. And that's all for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bordeaux Williams. I have Ms. Henry with her hand up.
Yes, and I know we talked a little bit about this. What might the impact of any of this return be from teachers if they're unwilling to come back into the building? Because I'm hearing that there's a lot of trepidation out there with teachers who are saying that they're just not ready to come back in, whether it is even if they're in the classroom, and especially with the rises. And as you indicated, Dr. Smith, this was done at a period of time before, even with the survey, we're looking at, 1 million cases in a week in the United States.
You want me to answer that, Dr. Smith?
Sure.
Well, and I can piggyback on and ask Ms. Jackson to pitch in. The reality is that we have received inquiries from a number of staff members asking questions about what is their option for leave. The Family First Corona FFCRA expires December 30th in terms of eligibility for that. There are other eligible leave that can take place. These are one of the factors that speak to how we put together a schedule. We need to determine the extent in which how many faculty members will not be available to put together a schedule. We're working through that. That's through HR. We don't have a definitive, but there are particular areas in which particular staff members can qualify for leave. And we need to determine the extent of that qualification and what that means for our ability to move forward with any model that we choose.
And just one comment, which is I know a number of schools have found that educating the younger K through 6th grades are a bit more easier with little to no infections in the school, but more challenging at the high school level. And so, and I know we just talked a little bit about that, looking even at the hybrid model, whether, we go to a fully virtual for the high school or, something that provides a bit more support to the younger grades. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Ms. Henry, did you have any other questions or comments? No?
No, Julie, I'm good. I lowered my hand.
Thanks. I'm just checking. Mr. Fishbein, Ms. Sloman, or Mr. Pender, any questions? I don't see hands up, so.
All of my questions were asked and answered. Thank you.
Same as well. My questions were all asked.
Great. I just have a couple more questions. Mr. Pender, do you have any questions?
Yeah, actually I do. I didn't, but I do.
Go ahead.
We talked about a lot of stuff. How's the cleaning going to take place? Once we roll, if we do transition and kids come back, even a hybrid, I know now I have a couple clients who are really struggling with that, trying to get the turnaround because the cleaning has to be so in depth. I mean,
we're not going to struggle with that because you approved our health and safety plan that put together the cleaning schedule. If you recall, we did put together a plan that we presented, and that we believe that we have put into place all the guidelines necessary. I think the challenge that we are going to face is really about a staffing challenge. And also what Dr. Smith had referenced was the challenge of the high school. So the idea that multiple teachers are using multiple classrooms, and how do we put together a schedule that that ensures that we properly are cleaning those classrooms in a meaningful way. But I don't have any concerns about the manner in which we've put a plan together and what we've been doing. I think it's the capacity in terms of, are we sure we have the people every single day needed to facilitate that plan? And as you know, we could have a situation and we have 8 people who are out or 11 people who are out. And that is a game changer in terms of that particular department.
I mean, because I know in some chemicals has to sit on the surface for X amount of time. And when you short people, yeah, I know. And you answered my question, that's going to be tough.
Yes. But we have the appropriate cleaning materials, the PD that's been provided to our staff in order to facilitate the cleaning process per the CDC guidelines.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pender, for your question. Dr. Smith and Dr. Marseille, thank you very much for this presentation. It was very thorough, and I know it took an awful lot of time to put together. Really appreciate you incorporating all of the feedback you've gotten so far as part of the reopening committees, as well as other feedback we've gotten through emails from the community as well. With that said, I had a couple of questions. Dr. Smith, I wanted to be, I wanted to make sure I heard you correctly. When you said the blended learning model, did you indicate that we would be going back kind of in a gradual basis? So let's say on January 11th, it would be K through 4 or K through 6, and then we would continue to add levels or classes each subsequent week or each subsequent day?
Yes, that is correct. With the exception of the example you gave, K through 4, it would be more like K through 2. So we're trying to bring back approximately like half of the building as we gradually bring students back. So at Cedarbrook, for example, we would bring back 7th grade for 2 days and then incorporate 8th grade so that we're gradually bringing them back. And again, at the high school, in theory, a 9, 10, and then an 11, 12 return. But high school, again, is too fluid at this time to really lock in high school. But yes. So again, at Elkins Park, rather than bring in half of 5th or half of 6th, we would just bring in 5th grade and then bring in 6th grade to have a smooth return.
Okay. And with that approach, when would you expect that all of the students who've chosen a in-school hybrid learning platform would be all back in school, maybe alternating days or every day except for Wednesdays?
So if, and I preface this with if we bring students back on the 11th, which is a Monday, we would be at a full hybrid model by January 25th, which is also a Monday. So 2 weeks. So by January 25th, that Monday, everyone will be coming back in a hybrid model. So no more gradual, no more staggered. Everyone who has selected it, and if you're in group one, and we have that group one, group two model, group one will come back that Monday and Tuesday. Group two will come back that Thursday and Friday. If we didn't have enough students to warrant a group one and a group two, it would be all hybrid students coming back that week. So to Dan, Mr. Schultz's question, if we were to push back the 11th date to say the 19th, then the full hybrid model date would also shift a week.
Okay, that makes sense. With the December 14th staff return to the buildings to teach from the buildings, what dependencies are we kind of looking at in terms of both Montgomery County and Cheltenham data that would play a role in that particular date at all?
I'll defer to Dr. Marseille on that.
Unless the county shut down, which they could, but there is no data point because currently there are teachers in Montgomery County who are teaching from their classroom as we speak. Unless there was something that was happening in our buildings that would prevent them from coming into there, whether we had a functional issue with the ability to clean the building, is probably the only parameter.
Okay. Just in terms of timing, this is my last question. If in fact we're looking at a January 11th start date, would it be reasonable to evaluate given kind of the volatility of the data really day to day? If we looked at that data on December 30th, would that give us a bird's eye view in terms of whether that January 11th date was feasible or whether we needed to add an extra week?
You push it back, we have to push everything back. If you're asking to make a determination on December 30th, then we're pushing those dates back.
No, I'm saying if we made the determination today on January 11th,
yes,
with those dependencies, if the data obviously changes, but isn't necessarily at the point of closing the schools, but it was of concern.
I go back to the fact that there are 3 significant data points we're looking at to determine a shift. Either you have link transmission inside your building, and you begin that conversation with the Office of Public Health. Second data point is that your incident rates are between 80 and 100 for 2 consecutive weeks, and or your positivity rates are between 6 and 8%. And then the third data point is functional closure, the extent in which you do not have the personnel to adequately function as an organization to put out a product that normally of the highest quality. So those would be the 3 areas in which we would review to determine what that is. The board, because this keeps coming up, the board does have a discretion. If they feel that they want administration to put a very hard metrics to say, Dr. Marseille, if we go over 7.2% of positivity in Cheltenham, we should shift into a remote learning model for all.
Okay. Then I think there's a question in terms of, this is for both of you, I suppose, in terms of the hybrid model A or B. What are the factors that would be looked at in terms of selecting A or B? Is that the number of parents who are making those choices?
Correct. So if the majority of the students, which based on our survey, that's not the case. If the majority of our students were to come in person, we would have to do hybrid A, which would have a group 1 and a group 2, so that we don't have a large number of students in the building at any given time. If we have about a 50-50 split where half of the kids are going to stay home anyway, we could bring them all back each day because, for example, and this is very basic, so it wouldn't happen like this, but I'm trying to make a point. If you have a class of 20 students and 10 of them stay home, and we could socially distance 10 kids in the classroom, there's no need to say you only come Monday, Tuesday, and the other group comes Thursday, Friday, because all 10 could come every day and still socially distance and still have that 6 feet difference when they're in the classroom. So that's what we'll be looking at. And that's another reason why it's so important for families to not only declare what they want to do moving forward, but also do it in a timely manner so that we can decide whether or not we're going to a hybrid A or a hybrid B, because that would also slightly modify how teachers will approach instruction and how teachers will plan.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other board questions? I don't see any hands up. Then Dr. Marseille, could you pull up the agenda again, please?
I'll ask Miss Peters to do that, because I think whoever was running the agenda, is that Miss Peters, I believe?
Yes. So if you could go up a little bit, Miss Peters. So just procedurally, I just want to offer that the board will not be voting on this amendment right at the moment, but we have to pose the amendment before we go out to public comment so that you'll know what's on the floor that the board is considering. And so I'm going to present this amendment, Amendment of Health and Safety Plan. The administration recommends that the Board of School Directors approves the amended Cheltenham School District Health and Safety Plan as attached. As outlined in the amended Health and Safety Plan, the district will switch to a hybrid model effective January 1, 2021. And
Julie, that's January 11th.
I'm sorry, yeah, January 11th. What did I say? I didn't say that. So it's January 11th, 2021. Thank you, Ms. Henry, for that correction.
Yeah, you said January 1st. My something came over my screen. I couldn't answer.
Yes.
It was you said January 1st. Yes, it's the other.
Thank you for that correction. I appreciate it. And the rest of this, basically, the board would authorize the superintendent or designee to submit the plan, the health and safety plan, to the Pennsylvania Department of Education in the form and manner prescribed by the Pennsylvania Department of Education, similar to what we did before. To the extent that procedures, part of my thing is shut off, outlined in the health and safety plan, in its currently amended form or as amended is in conflict with any applicable board policy or administrative regulation, the approval by the board of the health and safety plan and any amendments thereto shall also be considered approval of an exception to the policy and administrative regulation in conflict for the limited purpose of carrying out the provisions of the health and safety plan. The board authorizes the superintendent or his designee to take any other actions the superintendent deems appropriate without further board approval to ensure the safety of students and staff to the extent authorized by law and irrespective of any policies that may be to the contrary, including minor revisions to the plan, which shall then be approved by the board at a subsequent meeting. Any decisions regarding the days, and times for scheduling of hybrid instruction are delegated to the superintendent. With that, I will ask for a motion to approve the amendment of health and safety plan as presented. And Dr. Marseille, did we, other than what was presented by Mr. Blackwell last Tuesday, were there any other changes to the health and safety plan since then?
Not significant changes.
Okay. Okay, with that, I'll have a motion to approve the amendment as read of the amendment of the health and safety plan.
So move, Charles Burdell Williams.
Okay, Mr. Williams is the first. Do I have a second?
Second, Joel Fishbein.
Okay, Mr. Fishbein, is there board comment? We're not going to vote on this right now, but I'd like to have board comment before I take it out to the public for any questions that they may have.
Ms. Haywood, will there be another board comment after, or is this the moment for board comment on this motion?
So I'm going to defer to Mr. Diazio.
Sure.
my assumption is that this is time for board comment on this particular amendment. And then we would go out to the public to ask for any of their questions and comments on the proposed amendment. And then to the extent that there are additional changes or comments to the amendment of the health and safety plan, it would come back to the board.
Okay, thank you. So this is not the moment to make proposed amendments. Okay.
So, Mr. Diazio, procedurally, I just want to make sure that that is accurate.
Yes, so there are two different ways that you can look at this. Prior to the board taking a vote on any amendment to the plan, there will need to be an opportunity for public comment. So the board could deliberate the amendment that has been motioned and seconded, and we can take public comment at this point in time after there's board comment, or alternatively, if there's a motion to amend the motion that's on the table, the motion can be amended at this point in time, but you would need to take public comment before voting on the amendment.
Okay, so with that said, I see a couple of hands up, and that would be for board comment on the current amendment that's on the floor, amendment of health and safety plan. I have Mr. Burdell Williams, Mr. Cohen, Mr. Schultz, and Ms. Lohman. Mr. Burdell Williams.
Thank you, Mrs. Haywood. First, very confident and proud of the decision that the district made back in the late summer, autumn, to stay virtual and to focus on ensuring that our students had the very best virtual education that we could provide. That was in a mode of continuous improvement based on where we were in the spring. And I believe that where we are right now is also looking at our current move, or the current administration recommendation toward moving toward a hybrid plan, as further continuous improvement of where we have been. And so I'm again proud of what the district is doing in that regard. Based on the tenets of the current health and safety plan, confidence that I have in our community members and teachers and administrators to adhere to local and federal recommendations regarding mask wearing, social distancing, and reduced gathering, etc. And that there has been very little to no link transmission to schools. I appreciate that we are having this conversation right now, and just want to again share that the tenets of the plan, as shared today and at times previously, do fit the mode of what I would see as something that is beneficial for all in our school district. Assuming there are some small questions that will come up along the way, I know this will not be perfect, but I appreciate the administration's flexibility in this regard. Lastly, I would really hope that through this conversation, regardless of where we are today or next week, that we continue to revisit what's best for our students and our teachers and our community members on an ongoing basis, at a rate close to or quicker than what is being presented to us by our local, state, and federal health professionals. That's all I have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burdell Williams, for your comments. I have Mr. Cohen.
Yes, thank you. And I want to thank Mr. Burdell Williams for his comments, some of which I was going to mention or echo, but I won't in the interest of time. I just want to mention a few things. One is, it's my understanding, I'm not asking that this be amended, but that if the county or the state or the federal government determine that schools should be shut down, that would then override this plan in terms of the details of the plan that was determined, where schools have to be shut down or modified in some other way. That again, my understanding, would supersede whatever either health and safety plan elements you have in place, including possibly altering how schools operate and or necessitating them to shut down again. My other comment is in terms of, I hope that there's a process and a means and a practice and discipline that can be agile in nature, where if different stakeholders come with comments or concerns, once we do go back to school in person, that those can be addressed in a meaningful way, and the information can be shared with parties as appropriate in terms of courses of action that have been taken or how those issues are being addressed or will be addressed. And that's my last comment. Again, I just want to thank the administration again for their deliberation and hard work in this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. I do have a question for Mr. Diazio based on your comment, Mr. Cohen, in terms of any state or federal mandate in terms of closure of schools or any other imposition of a variation of that on potentially the January 11th date. Mr. Diazio, from my perspective, it looks like if that were the case, would we need to modify or the amendment that adds language at the end that the hybrid switch to a hybrid model effective January 11, 2021, subject to state or federal laws or directives or something to that effect?
If after the board adopts a motion or adopts an amendment to the health and safety plan, if a new federal or state law requires a different outcome, that new federal or state law would override this board action, just as it did in March when schools were closed. So I don't think you need to add anything to the motion that's before the board. And I would concur with what Mr. Cohen said, that if there was a state or federal mandate in the form of an order directing schools to be closed, that would override a decision by the board to reopen pending further action of the board.
Great, thank you for that clarification.
And I'm sorry, Mrs. Haywood, I just want to also add in, and also county into that conversation. So county, state, or federal.
Yeah.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Cohen. I have Mr. Schultz.
Thank you. I want to reiterate the thanks for this plan. I'm going to start with that. I think that this plan is an excellent one. Where I have concerns is the timing of the plan, which is nobody in our administration district on this call have any control over the reason I have concerns. The reason is rooted in the numbers that we're looking at and the trajectory of the numbers that we're looking at, and the timing of what is arguably the most high rate of indoor family social gatherings, the likes of which are exactly the kinds that will spread and exacerbate this pandemic. We're looking at numbers today that would, and actually, I guess I'll frame this as a question, although maybe we're at past questions, but I won't even frame it as a question. I know that the numbers we're looking at today would
Mr.
preclude
Schultz, you
us.
have to ask the question mark.
Okay. Dr. Marseille, am I correct in my understanding that the numbers we're looking at today are at the third tier threshold that would say, according to the guidance of the Montgomery County health officials, we should only be considering a virtual model? Were we talking about tomorrow, or were we talking about today? Is that correct?
According to whether you're low transmission, moderate, or substantial, based on incident rates and positivity rates, that because Montgomery County is in a substantial rate, because Cheltenham is substantial, that they would recommend that schools shift to a virtual, not a mandate, just
Understood.
that they would recommend.
Thank you for that clarification. So the current, it strikes me as,
I'm sorry, Mr. Schultz, it's over 14 days consecutive.
Over 14 consecutive days.
Yes.
So I guess my point here is that the numbers are not pointing towards it being a prudent decision to reopen. So that means to me that unless we are optimistic for some reason that between now and early December, and between now and January 11th, that those numbers are going to shift for the better, it would not be a good idea to approve this plan, this plan's dates. So it's not about the plan itself, but the dates associated with this plan. And I just wanted to float that. And I honestly, I don't feel anybody here has enough information to be able to make a good solid guess as to when those numbers are going to change. So I don't even know if an amendment specifying February 11th or March 11th would be prudent. So that is my deep concern. For those listening, I know there are many members of the community on this call, and I know there are many parents who are desperate for a closer to normal education for their kids. I'm a parent of a kindergartner. I'm feeling the pain myself. We have sacrificed a lot as a community. I think that the fact that our community hasn't seen outbreaks is very likely because of the caution that we have all been collectively taking. And I'm looking at the numbers and I'm seeing hospitalization rates go on the rise, ventilator rates going on the rise in this county. And at some point, it's not just a matter of somebody who's going to have inconvenient symptoms. We're going to get to the point where hospitals have the chance of being overrun, and we are facing situations that New York faced in the beginning of this pandemic. I don't want to see that in Cheltenham. I don't want to see that in Montgomery County. And I think we need to hold strong. So that's my deliberative comments and opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. I'm going to go to Ms. Sloman.
Thank you, Mrs. Haywood. I wanted to thank Dr. Marseille and Dr. Smith also, as my fellow board members already have, for their time and the time of their team in putting forth this plan. I appreciate the detail of it, and having it set out in black and white is also very helpful to sort of see how we would phase everything in. I do share Mr. Schultz's concerns about the timing of the plan. I too do not have concerns about the details of the plan. I am confident if we go with hybrid model A or hybrid model B, we'll be able to work the kinks out of either one that we choose. I am concerned for the reasons that he said, that particularly that the numbers keep going upwards in a very alarming way, that we might not be at the point where we are able to make a determination that we should be bringing staff back in the building, more staff, because we already do have staff in the building, more staff in the buildings back in December. And really what my major kind of concern about that is the issue, as you had already mentioned, Dr. Marseille, of functional closure. I'm looking at the number of participants that we have who've called in, or I should say attendees who have called into this meeting, and I don't know every staff member in the district by any means, but the majority of attendees appear to be staff members. We also have had the opinion of the union expressed to us as well. So I'm really concerned about the issue of functional closure and whether or not we're even at a point where we think we would have enough staff who would be willing and able to come back into the buildings starting on December, December 14th. And so that would be my main consideration, in addition to the increasing numbers of the positivity rates and the incidence rates. And the incidence rates are really, to me, completely sobering and alarming. And so my opinion on this would be if we could potentially push this back maybe for another month, and see where we are at that point then. I do understand the desire to have the staff members come in the building, though. I really do understand that, because we want them to be able to be comfortable in the building and know how things operate in the building and what works and what doesn't work technologically. So I really do appreciate the desire to get folks in the building, and I'm hopeful that staff members and the union will be willing to, continue to work with the district on that issue and be willing to come in and, at some point and not kind of continue to sort of I hope that we can work with that. So, that's my thought on all of this. My other kind of just thought that people have already mentioned um, is the issue of, if the high school scheduling it becomes particularly complicated with hybrid, keeping the high school all virtual and having perhaps K through 8 be hybrid, or something along those lines. But for me, the plan is written is fine. I agree with Mr. Schultz. I'm just concerned about the timeline right now.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sloman. I just have one comment before I'll go out to the public, and I'm really pleased to see that we have over 180 participants in this call this evening. So we will be going out to the public momentarily, and so just please bear with us. From my perspective, we made a very important but deliberative and difficult decision before school opened this fall. We looked at all the data. We looked at, survey information. We looked at information that we were getting back in the various committees. I do think as a board, we do need to make a determination, a decision about transition from a virtual to a blended or hybrid model. Obviously, relying on our public to basically provide us with guidance with respect to whether it's a hybrid model A or hybrid model B. I do think, and I'm very confident in the safety plan that was put together by the administration, taking into consideration first and foremost the safety of our staff and students. This is November the 16th. There is quite a bit of time between now and January the 11th, where we will be evaluating and monitoring the data in the district, in the county. And to the extent that the January 11th date either gets modified or changed based on circumstances out of our control, that could happen. But I do think that it's an ability for us to reevaluate during this time, but at least starting with a starting date of January 11th provides a lot of advance notice to our community that that's the direction that we're planning to go in, and that we will be
Excuse me, sorry.
That date obviously based on data that we have available to us and all information that we have available to us. So I want us to keep that in mind as we are evaluating this amendment of the health and safety plan. That's my only comment. I have Ms. Henry has her hand up.
So yes, Julie. So I want to echo both Jenny and the concerns that Jenny and Dan expressed about the timing. I think the plan is a very solid plan. I think the timing is off, and considering even in Philadelphia right now that they've closed, they basically are shutting things down, even to the point where public and private events, they're basically saying that they shouldn't be gathering outside of your own immediate family. So that's what my concerns are. It's not about the plan, but I do think that, to Mr. Schultz's point, we are coming up on two of the most socially gathering holidays between now and December, which I think is going to pose tremendous risk because everybody is just not going to not participate. And my husband and I, just since this weekend, have 3 friends who, where before seemed, was pretty calm. We have 3 friends that are either sick with COVID, symptomatic, and or in the hospital. And so I do have significant concerns about the safety of our staff coming back in the building. Now, that said, one of the questions that I have is, can we provide staff, depending on how this vote goes, with at least the option to go back and teach from the classroom if that's what they choose to do? Because it may be a easier environment, and these would be people who are willing to go back into the buildings. Because I think that, you know, if we have significant concerns from our staff, whether they're, you know, our teachers and other administrators about being back in the building, that we're not going to be able to open up in that model anyway, because we're not going to have the support that we need. So just those are just my comments.
Thank
And
you.
I mean, yes, virtually, yeah, virtually teaching from their classroom is what I meant with them coming back in.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Thank you for your comments, Ms. Henry. I'm going to now take it out to the community. Again, I really appreciate the number of people that are currently on the line on the Zoom call. And so if you could.
Ms. Haywood,
Yes.
do we follow a 10-minute, during the 10 minutes, they will put their information in?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I'm going to go to that part of the agenda. Okay. We're going to take a 10-minute break, and during that time, if you have a question or comment, please send that to csdboardmeetingcomments@cheltenham.org. Please include the name and where in the township you reside. And after the 10-minute break, we'll reconvene, read your questions, and answer any questions that are presented. Again, thank you very much for participating in this meeting. We'll take a 10-minute break. The time is 8:51. We'll come back at 9:01. Alrighty, thank you very much. And if you put questions in the Q&A, I'd ask you to please pose them in the CSD board meeting comments at cheltenham.org. Thank you. It's 9:01 and we're going to reconvene the meeting. There were several questions that came into the CSD email, and I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Diazio to read the questions that came in and afford an opportunity for doctors on his administrative team to address any of the questions that are raised. And before we start, I want to thank all of the participants this evening for submitting your questions and for being for participating in this meeting tonight. Very important, difficult decisions to be made. So thank you. Mr. Diazio, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Haywood, and I will read the comments as they've been coming in. All right, so the first comment comes from Jack Kelly, CEA President. The message reads, Dear Dr. Marseille and the Cheltenham School District Board of School Directors, in light of the Montgomery County Health Department's recent decision to close all schools for a 2-week period beginning November 23rd through December 6th, as well as feedback from members concerning the upcoming return to school on December 7th, CEA is respectfully asking you to consider delaying the teacher return date until some point in January prior to a probable student return in January. Many feel that the Montgomery County Health Department will end up making a similar declaration concerning winter break. With that in mind, CEA would like you to consider delaying the planned December 7th return of teachers until some point after January 4th. It is becoming very clear that the 2 holiday periods will be times of increased community activity and heightened exposure, resulting in a probable increase in COVID-19 positivity rates. Thank you for your kind consideration of this request. The next message comes from Laura Justice from Glenside, and the comment reads, when will we know the individual teacher's decision on if they will be in person or virtual? This could be a deciding factor on if families choose hybrid and/or virtual. The next comment comes from Sherry Leather. There is no address or area of the township, Mrs. Haywood, indicated on this email. Is the practice to skip those emails or to read them?
I'm sorry, in terms of an unrelated email?
It's related, but it does not indicate where the commenter resides in the district.
Ms. Leather actually resides in Elkins Park.
Okay. All right, then we'll go ahead and we'll read this one. It says, good evening. Please answer the question I have had since July 2020. Actually, I'm sorry, this comment actually does not relate to the transition. So I'm going to skip that one for now. The next email comes from Reem Tarazi from Elkins Park. The comment reads, thank you so much for the wonderful virtual model that has been implemented this fall and the incredible efforts to support our students and teachers in this unprecedented time and to get students back to school. I, for one, strongly support the idea that students and teachers can return to school safely, particularly our elementary students, and hope that the board supports a plan for our students and parents to have this option. I would like a clarification of the hybrid plan A, which indicates that children are assigned for synchronous instruction Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday, and asynchronous learning on Wednesday. Does this mean that under this plan, children will move from 4 days of synchronous instruction currently to only 2 days of synchronous instruction? Or would all students be taught by teachers 4 days per week, attending in person 2 days and virtually the other 2 days? If hybrid plan A only provides 2 days of synchronous instruction in total for hybrid students, there would be a reduction in learning/teaching from our current virtual model. Some schools and districts in our county are providing a hybrid model with 4 days of synchronous instruction, 2 of those being live and 2 virtual, so that teachers move forward with 4 days of new curriculum exposure per week with all students simultaneously. I opted for hybrid, but would have concerns about a model that would mean my children have 3 days a week with no synchronous learning/teaching, meaning far less structure at home and loss of instructional time. Finally, are hybrid and virtual students doing the same work at the same time? If a hybrid student needs to be quarantined or absent temporarily, do they jump onto the virtual classroom for that time? Thank you again for all your efforts and your commitment to educating our students while maintaining their safety and that of our students and teachers, staff and teachers. The next question comes from Gina Crago from Elkins Park. The comment reads, "Thank you for the explanation and thorough details and planning that went into this. I've been grateful and appreciative at Cheltenham School District's thoughtful handling of schooling during a pandemic. However, I have paused hearing that there is a possibility that the high school will not have the option of a hybrid model. What will be the deciding factors that come to that conclusion? I recognize the challenges. However, my 10th grader is struggling in this model. We're seeing grades that we've never seen from her, and her confidence and mental health are suffering without much support being available to the students. We're increasing the learning gap. Those students who school comes easy to are doing fine. The ones who it does not come easy to are suffering badly when the consequences could affect their college search and overall educational outcomes. Please don't overlook the needs of some high school students due to logistical challenges. Thank you again." The next comment comes from Danielle Rochette from Wyncote. Comment reads, "Hello, when staff returns to school, do we go in on Wednesdays or is that a deep clean day? If an elementary child chooses virtual, will they now have to be on the computer until 3:40 daily? How will specials be taught? Will students travel to their rooms or will the specialist teachers come to our classrooms?" The next comment is from Catherine Giacoletti. And the comment reads, "I am alarmed that the district appears to be pushing forward with plans to bring people back into the school buildings despite the surge in COVID cases, which is likely to be worse, not better, in mid to late January. Secondly, regarding the proposal for symptom screening as a preventative measure, symptom screening has been shown to be ineffective for prevention, particularly in young people, many of whom are asymptomatic even when infected. And among those who do become symptomatic, they are most infectious just before they show symptoms. The only way to safely manage in-person learning is frequent widespread testing." We have another comment here from Reem Tarazi from Elkins Park. This is a short comment, so I will read it. "Mr. Schultz and Ms. Lohman, in their comments and questions referring to guidelines for school reopening that considered community rates of infection as being in the substantial range as being the guideline to keep schools virtual, but isn't that based on outdated guidelines? I believe that Dr. Marseille also presented the updated guidelines from September, which allow for low evidence of in-school transmission to be a factor that can now guide our decision to have students in school despite rates of community transmission. Can Dr. Marseille clarify the current guidelines and the role that low evidence of school transmission can have in the board's decision? I worry that the vote will rely on outdated guidelines, keeping our children out of school longer than they should be." The next comment is from Rebecca Condict from Elkins Park. Comment reads, "When we switch to hybrid/blended learning, will the same teacher be expected to teach to in-person and distance students at the same time, or will teachers be focused on either distance learning students or in-person students? If the same teacher will be teaching a mix of in-person and remote students, how will we ensure an equitable experience between those in person and those online? Allowing teachers to be focused on either in-person or remote students will provide a much better experience for both the teacher and the student. Why would we switch Cedarbrook and the high school to their normal start time when we start hybrid schooling? Research shows this later start time is better for teens, and this later time has been so much easier for kids and their families. Definitely one of the perks of distance learning. The next question comes from Fernanda Limos from Glenside. The comment reads, if students go to a hybrid model on Monday, Tuesday, how will they receive instruction on Thursday, Friday? Will they be taught by the same teacher? Will teachers teach both models at the same time? The next comment is from Dan Coons from Wincote. And the comment is, how will rooms be cleaned in between periods in a hybrid model? The next comment is from Leslie Smith from Elkins Park. And the comment reads, I am in agreement with Mrs. Henry, Mr. Schultz, and Mrs. Lohman's concerns with the timing of the reopening hybrid plan. January and even February seems extremely too early and rushed to consider for a reopening date, given the current spikes we're observing with COVID. Perhaps spring reopening timeframe would yield more success. The next comment is from Krista Sawula Kerr from Elkins Park. The comment reads, this is not a solid plan for high schoolers at all, in any way, shape, or form. Add in what our nation and our community is suffering through with COVID numbers shooting through the roof. You closed all schools for one exposed case back in March. And now this uncertainty for our staff and our children. And those who choose to stay at home, they suffer because they are not guaranteed teachers who cannot necessarily support their rigorous academic schedule and needs. This is not at all a solid plan for high schoolers. You need to push back the timeline until April at the earliest. Do not add this excruciatingly suffocating burden of doubt and uncertainty to my child's life. He's already broken. Next comment is from Pierre Chanoine from Elkins Park. And it says, I live in Elkins Park and I am the proud parent of 3 children in the school district. Given the lack of school-linked transmission, children should be allowed to return to in-person education to underscore our priorities as a society. We have reassuring examples from around the world which support this approach. Many medical experts have pointed to smaller gatherings, like inside homes and around kitchen tables, as prime spreading events because of a lack of mask wearing and proper social distancing. The CSD safety plan is sound and thoughtful. As I understand it, Philadelphia continues to support schooling for elementary school education in person despite the newly announced restrictions. Thank you for all the hard work and consideration. Echoing some of the other comments, a start date of January 11th may need to be pushed back because of the numbers worsen, but not planning ahead seems like a missed opportunity because 4 weeks from now, the numbers may look very different. Thank you all. The next comment is from Catherine Giacoletti. The comment reads, hello, I live in Wincote and have a daughter who is a junior at Cheltenham High School. I am reassured by the number of board members who expressed similar concerns to mine. I realize the presentation was created before the recent spike in cases, but I am alarmed at the proposal to reopen in January. Infection rates and case numbers are going up and are likely to continue to do so, perhaps even more steeply over the next few months at least. Although you suggested that you can revisit the date, once January 11th is voted on and publicized, it will be difficult to overcome the political momentum created by that. One detail regarding the plan, symptom screening has been shown to be ineffective for prevention, particularly in young people, many of whom are asymptomatic even when infected. And among those who do become symptomatic, they are most infectious just before they show symptoms. The only way to safely manage in-person learning is with frequent, at least once a week, widespread testing. The next comment comes from Maria Garcia from Glenside, and there are a number of questions here. They read, are the students going to be out for recess? How will that work? Will they be wearing masks the whole day? Will they be going to specials, bathroom, and lunch? How? Who will be cleaning the bathroom and when? How will teachers or support staff be covered if they are out? What is the protocol with one person in a classroom gets sick? The next comment relates to sports, so I will defer that specific comment until we have the next discussion item on the agenda. There's a question here from Jen Hevko from Wincode Elementary. And comment reads, I would just like to clarify, if majority of families choose virtual, allowing for hybrid students to return every day, how will you be sure that kids will be continuing with their current teachers? Or is this something that will need to be considered by families as one of the variables that would contribute to their decision? Thank you. The next comment comes from Robert Coran from Glenside. The comment reads, first, I can't express how happy my wife and I are with how the Cheltenham School District has handled this unprecedented challenge. Thank you all for your candor, hard work, and flexibility. While I feel the plan is well thought out and as good as can be hoped for, the current spike in cases and positivity rates has made committing to a return date premature. I would recommend the board push the return to hybrid date back at least 30 days to allow more time for families, faculty, staff, and administration to make an informed decision. Thank you. Our next comment comes from Elaine Dawson from Elkins Park. And the comment is, if the district decides that the hybrid model will commence, will modifications be made as the plan progresses to make it more efficient for both staff and students, even if this includes amending certain rules and regulations? This could include start times, allowing students and families to change their decision about going virtual, etc. The next comment is from Komhee Beal from Elkins Park. And the comment reads, Ms. Henry, in her comments around the decision to return to school, incorrectly referred to the restrictions put in place today by Mayor Kenny in Philadelphia. The schools that have the capacity to open, facility, staff, ability to social distance, appropriate ventilation, etc., will remain open in elementary and middle schools. University and high school are the only schools mandated to go fully virtual as a result of today's restrictions. What evidence is being used to establish the guidelines necessary for decision making? It seems that community transmission is the only factor being presented by the board in their comments. Where are we using evidence from staff and students that have already been in school since September in our county and elsewhere? Please clarify so that we as a community can understand the decision being made is using the most recent guidelines. The next comment comes from Navis Azel from Glenside. And the comment reads, first, I would like to thank the administration for putting together a thorough, well thought out plan. I know there are concerns about the timeline, but I appreciated that the administration is giving appropriate time to prepare for the return of students. Even though the start date of January 11 may adjust, I think it is important to be prepared for the possibility that it may not. It is easier to shift the start date after preparation. It would be unfortunate to not be able to start January 11th if the numbers would allow, because we did not prepare in advance. I do have a few questions about what information will be available to parents before they are asked to make a decision. Will you know how the classes will be structured before parents make a decision? Know which model will ensure the same teacher may affect the parent's decision for elementary kids? Will we have an idea of how the school day will run? Staying in one classroom, recess, lunch, specials? How and if the students are moving around versus being stuck in one room may affect the decision of a parent. The next comment comes from Ellen McBennett Ivory, and the comment reads, I hope this finds everyone well. It feels like nobody has tried to think outside the box with respect to the high school kids. They are in the most important and least parent teachable portion of their lives. Coupled with the lack of outreach to parents for these kids, feels a bit like an abdication. Thanks and take care. The next comment comes from Rebecca Sheridan, science teacher at Cheltenham High School. Comment reads, will students at home be doing the same lesson as students in the classroom? If students are in the building, will they be allowed to do hands-on activities? If so, how will a teacher be able to correspond with a group online and effectively supervise a group in the classroom or vice versa? Next comment comes from Tanya Sobolov from Cheltenham. Comment reads, question, to clarify, would a move to the hybrid model with family choice mean that the current classes and schedules would stay the same and teachers would then be expected to move into their classroom to teach students in class and online students, hybrid and online students simultaneously? The next comment comes from Maya Gordon from Cheltenham. The comment reads, hello, Cheltenham school board members. I live in Cheltenham and I am the parent of 2 children, one at Cedarbrook and one at Cheltenham High School. I have 2 questions for the school board. Why are we considering opening schools when we are in the middle of a surge in COVID-19 cases? Public health experts have cautioned that transmission of the virus will be on the rise during the winter months. This does not seem like a good time for students and teachers to return to school. Number 2, will teachers be given the option to teach online in the same way that students are being offered the option regarding whether to continue online or return to the school building? I am concerned about the risk involved for both students and teachers. The next comment comes from Evelyn Todd from Elkins Park. Comment reads, good evening. The school board has asked for approval of the plan put together by the administration. I ask that they consider the plan and not attempt to put themselves in the role of health inspectors. The administration has put together a good plan. I hear comments indicating concern with the rise of COVID, which is true. However, if the cases continue to increase, the county, state, or federal government will indicate it is too high and will override any plan. Let parents decide if they want to send their children to back to school. Let's not focus on the hypothetical and deal with where we are today, as this is all very fluid. I also ask the administration to consider the hybrid model for the high school, as they need to be back at school just as much as the younger students. Thank you for your consideration. And the final comment that I have here is from Laura Justice from Glenside. And the comment reads, I hear the board's concern about the timeline. However, it is over a month and a half away. I feel it makes sense to move forward with the hybrid plan. It can always be pushed back if the numbers increase. But what if the numbers are in line? I feel delaying it would be a premature decision. It is a known fact that most COVID cases are transmitted through social events, not schools and work. Many, many industries and schools have been in person working through COVID since last March. Those are the comments I have, Mrs. Haywood, regarding this item.
Thank you very much, Mr. Diazio, and thank you very much to everyone who submitted a comment or had a question posed to the board. We really appreciate that. I'm going to ask Dr. Marseille and Dr. Smith if there are any questions that were kind of repeated questions that you wanted to answer before we get actually to the amendment at hand.
Yeah,
questions.
I'd love to figure out a way to streamline this because I'm trying to remember and write all the questions. So I don't know if we should, in the future, either decide we'll try to respond to them that night by hearing a few and then responding and then going to another 5 so that we make sure, because oftentimes individuals will email me and say, you didn't answer my question. When I tried to lump everything together in terms of giving a general theme, because some of them fell into themes. You know, I heard a lot of questions about staffing. will, depending on the model, parents thinking about which teachers they will have, and will that play a role, and that will play a role in their decision. The reality is that we don't know staffing until we determine who's coming back into the building for whatever reason. And there are staff members who have identified particular exemptions that they qualify for. So that off the bat is going to create the condition where families who are hoping for a particular teacher may not have that particular teacher. We are working to determine what that could look like and what that means. We need information both from faculty and from parents to begin putting together a schedule. And that is where we are with that process. There were questions about the clarification of criterias and what it is that we are going to use. The reality is, and I shared with this earlier in my conversation, that the Montgomery County Office of Health has provided a range in which school districts are recommended to use to make decisions about whether or not they are going to transition from one learning model to another learning model. And I said this earlier. The first one is linked transmission. To what extent can the district identify that the current cases are happening in their buildings amongst their students and staff as an indicator of whether or not they should shift into a different model? And the other is whether or not positivity and incidence rates are between 80 and 100, and whether or not positivity rates are 6 to 8%. And then to the extent in which functional closure, do you have the faculty available to deliver service? All three of those are a factor in making that decision. There was a question about are we thinking outside the box? I think what we are trying to articulate is that the development of a high school schedule is significantly more challenging than creating a schedule for the elementary and or for the for Cedarbrook Middle School. So we are going to have to dive a little bit deeper to look at those particular algorithms in order to better get a sense of where we are with the high school. So I hope people didn't walk away thinking that we were stuck to one model, or that we weren't thinking creatively. We need to try to find ways, because of the rotation, because of the sharing of classes, because students can't travel in cohorts the manner in which they do at our lower grades, that is going to be challenging for us. There was a question about cleaning and how do we clean. We've presented and we've shared our health and safety plan with how we go about cleaning our rooms. It was approved by the board. It was vetted through PDE when we submitted that information. Let me take that back. To what extent it was vetted through PDE, it was presented to PDE for approval. So we did put together a cleaning plan that meets CDC guidelines with how we are cleaning our buildings. We said earlier that we need to find a way, as teachers are sharing classes more at the high school, how we put together a plan that appropriately cleans the buildings. There were specific questions about the A and B schedule. I will defer that to Dr. Smith if she wants to respond to that now, or to later, with respects to if it is hybrid A, Monday, Tuesday, are students somehow not getting the same experience or the amount of minutes? I recall we did respond to that question because I think it rang a bell because it's come up. Let me see.
So in none of our models will students receive less than 4 days of a blend of asynchronous and synchronous instruction.
Thank you. There was a conversation, there was something about specials. All of that is part of the scheduling and how that works and the finer details of the schedule as we put it together. We are trying to create, and we shared this even back in March, April, May, June, July, and as we were thinking through that we were trying to keep students in cohorts as much as possible. Our elementary grades allow that to happen significantly easier than our secondary, especially high school level as well. Recess is a conversation with respects to how do we run recess. We will run recess the way we run our schools. We have to social distance students. They have to be at a minimum 6 feet apart. They cannot interact with other students of other cohorts to make sure that if there is a breakout or someone tests positive, we can clearly try through contact tracing attempt to do that. So when a core group of students go out for recess, they social distance, which is very difficult because you're asking young kids not to play with each other, which is the antithesis of what the elementary experience is all about or education is all about. But a group of students in this class will not have recess with another group of students in another class because we're trying to make sure that we keep students in cohorts as much as possible, knowing that it is a lot more challenging at the high school level than at the elementary. I'm trying to go through. If there's anything that I didn't cover in the broad conversations. Um, there were statements about symptom screening and its ineffectiveness with respects to that. We will follow the science with respects to that is the tool that we currently have. And until there is rapid testing, which we are in conversation with the Government Department of Education, with CHOP to determine to what extent is rapid testing available, how much of those rapid testing will make its way to Pennsylvania, and how much of it will make it to Montgomery County, and to what extent could those rapid tests be used to help mitigate the spread of COVID-19, knowing that those antigen tests are not as accurate, but they do help support finding ways in which we can mitigate and separate individuals in the event that is the case. But the statement is true that at the end of the day, there are individuals, obviously, who are asymptomatic, who present no symptoms, who are carrying the virus and are spreaders of that virus. And that's been the challenge for this country, is trying to make sure that we get as much testing as possible. But right now, the district does not have the capacity to test and test at a rate in which it would be efficient enough that would give us satisfaction that we are mitigating that through testing. The comments about the start time. And that's a conversation. I know they've been concerns about that with respects to the added benefits that obviously we've had with later start times. I'm not sure how to address that with this current process and what that means for us moving moving forward. And then there was, if I'm looking through my scribble, I think those are all my responses.
Yeah, I think Dr. Merced, there might have been one about if the same teacher will be teaching a mix of in-person and remote students, how will we ensure an equitable experience
Well,
between?
we're trying to learn from our colleagues who are in the current model with how that works. That could be the case where we have students in front of teachers while there are students streaming in, getting support or getting the same instruction.
And can I add that Dr. Riley and the team that he has put together with instructional technology, they have been working very diligently to make sure that we have all the latest apps and latest tools that are required to support teachers if a teacher were in a situation where they were teaching students in person as well as online. So we have looked at different ways to implement that. And I don't know if Dr. Riley wants to speak to that in more detail, but he and again his team, which includes our teachers, have been working on and vetting through ideas as to what that could look like. And that is something that is under consideration. That is something that we have thought about and thought through.
Thank you. And Dr. Marseille, to your point, the next time, given the volume of questions, we'll probably just read a couple at a time and ask you and your administrative team to answer those questions as they come in. It's very difficult to follow the number of questions that came in, but you did a great job.
And I do think that some of the responses with regards, some of the questions, they are embedded in our health and safety plan and the mechanisms that we've identified in our attempts, which is no guarantee because no one can, is to create a workspace that is as safe as it can as we are following the CDC guidelines.
Thank you. And there was a question that was sent in that was not related to the amendment at hand. And so that question that came in from Ms. Leather will be answered separately outside of this meeting forum. Again, that this was a opportunity for feedback from the community as it relates to the amendment that's actually on the board's docket this evening in terms of reopening. Thank you again, Mr. Diazio, for reading all those questions that came in, and really a heartfelt thank you for the community and submitting those questions, as well as the teaching staff as well. I'd like to go back to the agenda. Right now, we have a motion on the floor to approve the amendment of the health and safety plan that includes a transition back to school at a hybrid model on January 11th, 2021. This motion has been first and seconded by the board. And so I'm going to have this by any other board comment before we vote on this particular amendment. If this amendment fails, we have an opportunity to propose a amendment to the amendment of the health and safety plan. But we need to first vote on this particular amendment. Do I have any other board comment on the?
Ms. Haywood, I do have a comment.
Go ahead, Mr. Cohen. Excuse me, Mr. Fishbein.
Mr. Fishbein, yes. I would have raised my hand, but I can't find the button. So I'm voting, my vote will be in favor, but I want to say why, because I think that some of the dissent in the board comments should be addressed. And I see this as a place, one of the comments from the community said this, and I will reiterate that it's how I'm feeling. This is a placeholder. We can gear up to go back on January 11th as of now, But if case numbers stay the same or go up, that will be something that we will be revisiting and may very well be taken out of our hands. But for now, the vote is in favor of it. My vote will be in favor of it for that reason, that it doesn't set something in stone that's immutable that we can't then change with new data and considerations. So with that, that's all I had.
Thank you, Mr. Fishbein. I have Mr. England next for board comment. And
Thank
again,
you,
this
Ms.
is a board comment
Yeah.
on this particular amendment. Excuse me, Mr. England. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Haywood. So I understand why we have to have a timeline. We have to have a target to move towards. And that's what we see here in front of us this January 11th. This was January 4th last week, before this surge started. And I think the only way that this one actually works is if we have a point somewhere much closer to the 11th to reaffirm. Again, I understand and appreciate the need to have something to work towards. But because what we're seeing right now is an increase, because we saw the CHOP Policy Lab reverse themselves. These are the experts on pediatrics and on COVID-19. And they very quickly went from an encouraging tone to get back to schools to closing schools down. I think that, while I understand having the date out there, I think that I wanted to just say that I'm not sure that I'm comfortable with January 11th as the target date. And we'll have to vote against this or for an amendment to that date, just based upon the science around us right now.
Thank you, Mr. England. I have Mr. Cohen. Mr. Schultz, did you
Yes.
lower your hand?
No. Yes, thank you, Ms. Haywood. A question about process. Can we offer amendments now or can we not offer amendments now?
Oh, not yet. We have to first vote on this particular amendment, and then you can propose a modification of what we voted down, I believe. I will defer to Mr. Diazio to see if amendments can be offered at this point, but we have first and seconded this particular motion, so I believe we have to vote on this first. Mr. Diazio, could you clarify?
Well, so any member can make a motion to amend. If you make a motion to amend, that motion would then need to be seconded, and you would need to act upon the amendment before proceeding to the underlying motion. But a motion to amend is procedurally proper at this point or any point in time prior to the vote.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Mr. Cohen, are you offering an amendment to the current amendment?
Yes, with that clarification, I'd like to offer an amendment. I do agree with Mr. Fishbein's comments, and I do think that we need a target date to strive towards, and I won't repeat everything he said. I will, though, the amendment I'll offer is that we change the date from January 11th to January 19th. January 18th is Martin Luther King Day, and that would do several things. One, it would only buy us 8 more days, but it would also get us further away from the holiday period. And because of that, I think the further we get from the holiday period, the more assurances we can have to some limited degree about the spread of the virus and also how the holidays might have impacted the community. So my amendment, to be clear, is to change the date from effective July 11, 2021 to July 19, 2021. Thank you.
To January 19th, not July, right?
I'm sorry, January 19th, right? I'm sorry, January 19th, 2021, yes.
Because we'd be out of school. Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Do I have a board second? I'll second that. Do I have any board comment on the amendment that was offered by Mr. Cohen? And if you could raise your hand. Hi, Mr. Schultz.
Thank you. This comment, I guess, theoretically applies to both motions, but I'll focus on this one. And while I appreciate that neither this date nor the original date would be setting anything in stone, it does set things in motion. And so I personally don't feel comfortable picking a date that I don't feel, given all evidence, is appropriate to ask our community members to plan around. And I think it's important to recognize the inertia of picking a date and telling the community that the board has approved a plan to open on a certain date, and the angst that comes from changing a date closer to, both for the faculty and staff, but also for parents who are trying to plan. Regarding this specific date, I'm curious, this is a question for Dr. Marseille, how, given the fact that there are a series of timeline shifts that have to occur, and given the holidays, would a 1 week shift forward logistically work out given the holidays and the steps that need to be taken? It probably would, but I wanted to just clarify.
Yes, it would.
Thank you.
Mr. Schultz, did you have any other questions or comments?
No, that is my comment.
Okay, thank you. I have Ms. Sloman. You may be on mute. Oh, Ms. Sloman, did you lower your hand?
I can't hear her.
No, me either.
It looks like
There's
she
no
may be
sound.
having AV issues.
Yeah, she's having sound issues.
Okay. Mr. England, do you have your hand up as well?
No, I'm sorry. I didn't take it down.
Okay. I'll try again with Ms. Sloman. If you're able to call, and if you can't, please just put your question in the chat. Okay, I have Mr. Burdell Williams.
Thank you, Mrs. Haywood. It looks like Jenny has posted her comment to the chat if you want to read, just so we're not going out of turn.
I'll do that. Thank you. Okay, hold on 1 second. I'm having sound issues. I had the same comment as Dan. Very concerned about teachers not coming in during December. I'm going to log off and come back in. It's okay. Okay. I think that was it, Mr. Burdell Williams. So Ms. Lohman may come back in and ask another question.
If the board decides on this amendment to push the dates back, we push the dates back when staff members return.
Okay.
So it may not occur in December, depending on how far we push the date back. Maybe sometime in January.
So Mr. Burdell Williams, thank you for your.
Thank you, Mrs. Haywood. Quickly, I will share that I agree in concept to both the amended plan and the amendment, given the fact that I'm a supporter of having a finite point in time for us to be able to plan around. I believe that, to Mr. Cohen's point, the current amendment does give us a logical amount of time greater than 2 weeks from January 1st, which we could expect to be I would say the third large expected gathering of individuals, right? If you're considering the Thanksgiving holiday and the holiday season surrounding the celebration of Christmas and other holidays that may come in between, and then New Year's Eve being directly after that. So I'm again in support of the current amendment proposed by Mr. Cohen, and the administration's recommendation, again, in principle as well.
Thank you, Mr. Burdell Williams. I see Ms. Lohman's hand is raised, so I'm going to go back to Ms. Lohman. Hopefully you're able to get through.
She's on mute.
Ms. Lohman, you may be on mute. No, her mic is off.
She may want to try to connect via her phone.
Ms. Lohman, you may want to try to connect via your phone, or if you're not able to do that, if you want to put your question in the chat, I'd be glad to read it. Okay, while we're waiting for Ms. Lohman, hopefully she can either get back online or put her question in the chat. I just wanted to comment while we're waiting. I will also be voting for the amendment proposed by Mr. Cohen to move the date back to January 19th for some of the same reasons that my colleagues, Mr. Burdell Williams and Mr. Cohen, have stated. In short, the January 19th date, again, is 14 days after, more than 14 days after the January 1st New Year celebration and after the winter holidays. I think it also affords some additional time, and I would definitely be in favor of, in light of the comments that we received from CEA staff this evening, to look at the January 11th date as a date to bring teachers back into the buildings, which again is after the winter break and allows them to be adjusted and back in the building for a gradual return on January the 19th. Keeping in mind, as Dr. Smith shared with the board, that even for a January 19th return, it's a gradual return to the buildings by the students as well. So we're really starting at the elementary school level and then adding in grades gradually. So even in that pace, we would be looking at the beginning of February until everyone was back that chose to be back in a hybrid blended model. I am in support of the health and safety plan, very carefully drafted by the administration, and the plans in place right now with the hybrid models, either A or B, depending on what parents actually choose for their own children. Again, with the option of some parents and teachers deciding to either teach virtually or remain in a remote learning model. So for those reasons, I would be voting in favor of the amended amendment to extend the hybrid model effective date to January 19th. I'm going to go back to Ms. Lohman. Let me see. So going to January, this is Ms. Lohman's question. Going to January 19th takes teachers' return to December 21st and December 28th. How will that work? And I think
we are on winter recess.
So they would not be returning to the building on those dates.
Yes.
Right. And I think that's why I had offered Ms. Lohman that the January 19th date provides for me an opportunity, in light of the comments that were received tonight, to request the administration look at January 11th as the return date for the staff to come back into the buildings as they transition to the January 19th date for students coming back. Any other board comment before we vote on the amendment to the amended health and safety plan? Okay, Mr. Burdell Williams.
Yes, just a clarifying point for Dr. Marseille. In light of the amendment that is currently on the table now, as well as the original plan, the the date as stated on the original recommendation of January 11th, 2020, when the district will switch to a hybrid model, is when the first student who is not currently in the school building right now for means of special education services, etc., would be returning to the building. I just want to clarify that the change or the current amendment that's on the table from Mr. Cohen to change that date to January 19th would then mean that January 19th would be the first day that we would expect a child who is not currently in school for means of an IEP, et cetera, to enter the building.
You are correct.
Okay.
The first phase of students who are not currently receiving in-person instruction will begin their in-person, if they choose that hybrid model, on the 19th, and that will be staggered throughout those the next weeks.
Okay, I believe that's an important clarifying point for us, and I have one follow-up question.
Go ahead, Mr. Williams.
Thank you. So, given that, Dr. Marseille, what is the, again, you did share previously that a shift in that start date based on the board's adoption of an amendment to our health and safety plan would shift your timeline appropriately. And I would ask if we could, in this moment, given that new date of January 19th, if we could, what would be the first day that a teacher would be expected to enter the school building based on the new date of January 19th?
The amendment was a recommendation for a January 11th start for teachers to begin coming into the building and teaching virtually, to get acclimated in preparation for the 19th.
Okay, so we would have essentially, so our runway seems like it would be slightly shorter. So I want to ask one more clarifying question. Right now, I think because we have the winter break smack dab in the middle of what is the expected timeline right now, that is going to create what seems to be some complicating factors in terms of scheduling, whereas we would be at the current present amendment based on the recommendation of administration. If we were entering the building with the first student on January 11th and then having teachers start on December 7th, they would essentially have about 2 weeks to prepare on the front side of winter break, and then about a week on the back side. So a total of 3 weeks to prepare before we had the first student enter the building on January 11th. So now, if my understanding is correct, that will change to the first day a teacher enters the school being January 11th, and then essentially 1 week later or 8 days later, the first student enters the building?
That is correct. So we have compressed that calendar where the staggered luxury we had will not exist, and we will bring in staff accordingly in that week.
Okay, is there an opportunity? So I want to.
The concern was this: administration wanted to afford enough time for teachers to get comfortable about being in the building. We felt that that was good. We received and we heard that teachers shouldn't come back. Why are teachers coming back so early? Why is they coming back in the heights of the surge? And we just wanted to afford the opportunity to have more time in the building. The shift to the 19th will create an opportunity that, yes, teachers will come into the building to begin transitioning. It's just not going to be in a staggered manner, the way in which we originally put it in place.
That I appreciate that clarifying question. I will just share some general apprehension regarding the shortening of the runway from a 3-week, I'll call it an acclimatization period or reacclimatization period to 1 week, and that the district still consider 1 week ahead of the winter break as the beginning of the teacher acclimatization period.
Yes,
If I-
Mr. Bordeaux Williams, that would require you to vote no on the amended amendment, and then propose, if it failed, then you could propose another amendment to the amendment. Proceed.
I appreciate that clarification, Julie.
Julie, you're on mute. Ms. Haywood, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I have, thank you, Mr. Bordeaux Williams. I have Mr. Schultz and Mr. Cohen.
I also just had a process question around, and it maybe I don't think it's exactly what Mr. Bordeaux Williams was asking. If this is approved or rejected, we would still, regardless of the outcome, we would still have an additional vote on the original motion. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. The only, the vote that's about to take place is only to, on whether to change the January 11th date to January 19th. If that motion is successful, then the original motion, which I believe was a motion by Mr. Bordeaux Williams, originally seconded by Mr. Fishbane, that motion would then be amended, and the reference to January 11th would then be January 19th. The board could then still debate, further amend, and or vote that revised motion up or down.
Thank you.
Call the question. Is it time?
Ms.
No,
Haywood had indicated that Mr. Cohen had a question, but I
Oh.
see she seems to be muted. I'm not sure if she's disconnected.
Great. I can actually raise my question now, if that's okay. My question in terms of, again, clarifying for Dr. Marseille is the amendment again is for January 19th. It had been January 11th. There is the week of January 4th. Would it be possible to have the teachers or to do other associated things during the week of January 4th versus it being having the teachers come in January 11th? And would that make sense and would that be viable? So the question then again is the week of January 4th in terms of possibly having a broader window, which aligns somewhat closer to the original window with the language of January 11th. If the amendment goes forward and is approved for January 19th start date, could the teachers again use part or all the week of January 4th to get acclimated and do associate activities? Thank you.
The concern that came up was bringing teachers back into the building at this hour at the level of the surge. And then there was another statement with regards to, could we bring the teachers back in January? Then there was concern that we wanted to make sure that there was enough time between the winter break and the new year to give enough space for that isolation period to take place. And if January 4th creates that, then the board's comfortable with that. We will bring teachers back on January 4th to begin their transition. Remember, we need to make sure, and there was a question here with regards to, will this give, someone asked, Amy Flynn asked, and I just happened to pop it up, will this give technology enough time to address issues in terms of what's happening with streaming and things of that nature? We wanted to put in motion enough time, not because we are not sensitive to what teachers are saying. We wanted to be sensitive by bringing them back and giving them the window to let us know, here's what's working, here's what's not, here's my level of comfort, here's what needs to be shifted. They're working with their building principal. They're working with central office to make those shifts so that when students come back, we're not trying to address all those things all at the same time. That was the intent of a minimum of that window, to do a number of dry runs at a smaller pace versus, which is why we staggered it, versus bringing back 391 people all on day one, spread out throughout the buildings. So I'm not sure how the board wants to amend the amendment with respects to that. So administration stands that we wanted some time. The board has shared, or several members of the board have shared, the timeline is pushed back and made some reference to teachers coming back on the 11th. That gives us 5 days as a team to try to get our staff acclimated and ready for a 19 start. And I know that being out of a building for a length of time is going to be a learning curve under these COVID-19 transitions. But the start date is not part of the district's original proposal for teachers. It was really when we begin our hybrid experience.
So, Mr. Diazio, if the switch to the hybrid model proposal has been amended from January 11th to January 19th, and there has been discussion, which I'll note, there is a comment in the chat box or questions and answers from Amy Flynn suggesting that the technology department may need more time to do the work of the teachers returning. There isn't anything stopping the administration from choosing January 4th rather than January 11th as the start time for the teachers, or do we need to have that in this motion?
It is not required in that motion. It's just
Right.
the board has bringing it up.
And I think that given the discussion that we've just had, that issue has been vetted, and I think it is now time to call the question. And by the way, Ms. Haywood has had a family emergency. She left the call, so I am similar to Al Haig. I'm now in charge. Is there any further board comment? Dan seems to have his hand raised.
I have another procedural question. With Ms. Haywood's absence, what does that mean regarding tallies in her inability to vote?
Nothing.
Okay.
We have a quorum.
We have a
No, I
quorum
mean in
and
terms of how many
a
votes would need to occur to pass.
Oh, based on what she said?
No, just based on the fact that she won't be voting.
Mr.
Mr. Diazio, do we need 5 votes or a majority of the board members present?
In order for a motion to pass, we need 5 members of the
Okay.
board to make a motion for it to move forward.
Thank you. Mr. Fishman, do you need somebody to call to question? Or
I think I've called the question.
Okay.
I'll go in order of the board members on the screen. Mr. Schultz,
no?
Mr. Cohen,
Aye.
Mr. Burdell Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Pender,
No.
Ms. Henry,
No.
Ms. Lohman. Can you put it in the chat, Ms. Lohman?
You're on mute, Jenny.
I think she's been having.
If she's Miss Lohman, if you're on the phone, I believe *9 unmutes you, but if you're not, then so it goes.